What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to another episode of People Management Digest, the official podcast of Great Place to Work Canada. My name's Lucas Pesa. Today, I'm looking forward to this conversation and bringing it to you guys. We are joined by Lorne Rubis, the Chief Evangelist at ATB. We're not only excited to have him on just because of his experience and his knowledge and that kind of thing, but he will be joining us at our conference taking place on April 25th, so we're really looking forward to having him. Today, our conversation is going to be about how to advance the culture and how to advance organizational culture and trends and structures. Lorne brings up a lot of great points throughout this. He's got a lot of experience to draw on, so I think you guys are really going to benefit from it. He's got a really good quote that I'll share with you right now, just in case you don't make it all the way to the end. But make sure you do stick around, though. There's a lot of great content. The idea that I want to share with you guys is that culture is not an end, but it's a foundation. So that's one of the main points that really resonated with me, especially near the end of the conversation. Lorne's got a lot of great insights, and I think, again, you guys will really benefit from it. I won't take up any more time, so enjoy the podcast. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the podcast. Today, I'm joined by Lorne Rubis. Lorne, how are you doing today?
Great, Lucas. How you doing?
I'm doing very well. So today, what we'll be discussing is the advancement of organizational culture, kind of what that means, and how organizations can start thinking about it as they implement their own people management strategies. So one question that I wanted to open up with you is, when it comes to advancing organizational culture, how should that even be defined by an organization? There's a lot of different ways that organizations will even define their own learning objectives or their own HR objectives or people management objectives. So when it comes to advancing corporate or organizational culture, what does that look like? How would you define that?
So I think, first of all, everybody has to appreciate that whether you're intentional about it or not, or however you think about it, every organization has a culture. There's a set way of behaving and expectations. There's some purpose that lingers through the organization and then there's a set of behaviors that sort of define the essence of an organization, and that becomes the culture. So my argument is that the more clear and the more intentional and more defined one is about the culture, the easier it is to fully have everyone who makes that culture up to thrive, to contribute to drive that desired essence of what the organization is. And I think to know whether you're advancing it or not, or this notion of advancing, is the degree that people who make up the culture, in our case we have 5,300 team members, is the degree that every single person has a personal emotional connection to the why, to the purpose of the organization, and to its intended, either explicit or implicit values, its behaviors, its desires that it wants to, and it rewards and appreciates throughout the organization. So that's what I think. To what extent do people see themselves in the story or the purpose and in the values?
Well, I mean, and that's one question that I was curious to learn more about, actually, is when it comes to helping each person establish a connection to the organization and helping them become incorporated in the overall story of where the company is going or the narrative of the organization, that kind of thing. How can organizations make that connection in terms of making people feel a part of the narrative or part of the story of the organization? Or how can an organization almost help an individual find the connection between their personal goals and the organizational goals?
So, and I'll talk a little bit maybe by example of what we do in our case.
Yep.
When we concluded a couple of years ago that we needed to refresh or refine our purpose in a way that was more accessible, that we needed to up our game around having people see themselves in what we call our purpose, which we call our story, and it has 94 words to it, is we stopped the entire organization and had a full conversation with every single person for an entire day around the story, and we also had a conversation about clearly stated values, which we call our 10 ATBs. We took a day out and we told stories, and we had people at every level. Everybody participated, told stories. about how we make the story true and how they personally show up in the story and in our ATBs. And on a continual basis, every new hire that we bring on, the CEO and I spend a full day with approximately 60 to 70 people a month. Wow. We spend fully engaged on the story in the ATBs and how they see themselves in the story. You have to do it with that intentionality.
Yeah, and you mentioned that the 94 words is sort of it sounds almost like a mission statement or a sort of mission or vision statement.
I've been around long enough for the 40 years of my career to see the evolution of, vision, mission statements. This is not a new concept. It's been around since the beginning that organizations, anytime people collect it together from the beginning of time. The essence, though, of it is around how clear your why is, your purpose. And why do you wake up in the morning? Why do you come to this organization? What is the foundation of everything that you do? What connects everything you do functionally to the main, to the why? And it could be called the mission, or it could be called the purpose, and however you describe it, whatever it is, it's not fluff. It is the foundation of the essence of the contribution of every single person who makes up the institution.
Yeah, for sure. And when it comes to when organizations are trying to understand if they need to be advanced or adjusted, so going back to the overall topic about advancing organizational culture in general, how should organizations know they need to be advanced or adjusted? What are the sort of cues that an organization should take? How do you sort of get a pulse check on whether or not the employees feel connected to the organization or feel connected to the sort of notion of why they wake up in the morning, why they come to that particular job? So how can an organization almost get a bit of a pulse on how the organization feels at a certain time and how connected it is to the overall mission?
So I think first is at the top of the house, the leadership has to have this absolute thirst for honesty around where the organization's really at, and it has to have both sort of a quantitative and qualitative sense for it. So let's just talk about it on the qualitative sense. If people feel like, when you ask people around, what is the purpose of the organization and how they see themselves showing up, that should be a very consistent and easy answer for people to make. They shouldn't struggle around. There shouldn't be a whole bunch of different answers to it, and it shouldn't be a mumbling, stumbling kind of a narrative response to the connection to that. So that's one sort of the qualitative. And if you ask people to describe, what's the essence of what are the values? How do you what behavior does the organization really respect and honor and recruit to and celebrate? They ought to be able to clearly describe those as well. So that's on the qualitative side. There has a personal, emotional description. And you've got to be able to have things like the Great Place to Work survey. You've got to say, on the quantitative side, where are we in our trust index? Where are we in our engagement survey? Where are we in terms of retention? Where are we in terms of attracting, thousands of people? Like, we have 50,000 unsolicited and solicited applications to join ATB for 5,000 jobs. That's just one consideration. And then I think if you're not growing and improving on the customer metrics and the financial metrics, I think there's something inherently and systemically wrong with the culture/business model, or there's an opportunity. There's always an opportunity to advance it. At the essence of it is a thirst for the executive and the leadership to know where are we, and then how do we move forward.
And that's something that I think a lot of organizations are consistently trying to wrestle with and figure out is, because you mentioned obviously one of the things that indicates the, I guess, improvement rate is, the number of people who express their desire to want to work at the organization, that kind of thing. So in terms of, I guess, just to sort of build on the concept of knowing when an organization can understand how they need to advance or how they need to adjust in order to improve, what are some of the quantifiable, and you touched on it a little bit, but what are some of the measurables when it comes to monitoring how an organization is advancing? So how can an organization almost keep track and establish KPIs around how they're doing in terms of their improvement of their advancement of their culture?
I think the one thing, sort of at just the precursor, the prologue, is you better want to always advance to begin with. So advancing and the idea of moving forward, I think that you can never really be complacent and satisfied that the culture is, quote, we're satisfied with where we are relative to, making it a richer, contributing part in essence of the success of the company. And when you do that, I think you need to have this incredible kind of listening post. Like if you use the metaphor maybe of a driverless car, like you and I have our senses and we try to keep those senses sharp when we drive. A driverless car, if I understand correctly, has about 70,000 sensors on the car. And I think great organizations start to think about, how do I have 70,000 sensors, metaphorically, where we're listening all the time around how we're doing with each other, with our customers, with all our other stakeholders. And that starts to inform you. And that's why things like, when you do the trust survey, the Great Place, and I'm not just making this pandering comments for a Great Place to Work. I mean, I just believe in, you've got to know where you are on the trust side of the business, or you've got to have a whole series of listening posts around where are we doing. And then all that data informs you around typically, what you need to do to advance the culture. The customer data will tell you that if you're not growing and keeping and acquiring and retaining customers, typically it's the relationship between the people and the acquisition process and retention process where there's something broken that implies that there's something missing in underlying in the culture, and that also informs you then where to put your attention around advancing.
For sure, yeah, and you made some interesting points there, and one thing I wanted to sort of follow up on is, obviously organizations, when they're trying to figure out how they need to advance, and even before they decide how they're going to measure the impact that they have as they start to advance their culture, they almost have to understand a couple things even before that starts. So in your opinion, why do some organizations face difficulty adjusting to all of the things that we've been talking about? So when it comes,
because I think one of the big things is that at the most highest financial incentive level, there's so much short-term thinking in organizations. It's that quarterly, call with the analysts. It's, how the stock is performing on a very short-term basis. And you've got, a lot of compensation plans for executives where there's a very short-term kind of, keep the short, try and optimize each quarter. And I understand the practicality of that. The and that goes along with that is that advancing your culture is a systemic process. It's a long-term process. There, a lot of times people are looking for that silver bullet. There's something we just can do, right? And that's going to kind of, however, when you really kind of create a phenomenal culture, every element that you think that you put into the organization, from your people system to your technical systems to everything, they start to overall to be anchored in by your purpose and your values, and they connect to your strategy, and they work systemically. And so you've got to commit to parallel initiatives that continually move forward, and that takes long-term thinking and systemic thinking, and that's not resident in a lot of organizations.
Yeah, and especially because there is always such, demand to produce results, not only for, big organizations to meet their targets, but just so that the organization can, as we were discussing a little bit earlier, can continue to grow, can continue to innovate and do all the things that are necessary for it to remain competitive in the marketplace. What are some, just to sort of build on that a little bit, you mentioned that, long-term, a commitment to long-term thinking, parallel thinking is extremely important. What are some examples of, long-term organizational culture advancement goals that you've seen that have been successful?
Well, I think For example, if you just take a very, some people might consider trivial, but maybe kind of a small ribbon that could flow through an organization like a reward and recognition system. So we have a platform for recognition at ATB, where it's a social media type platform where you get to go on and recognize team members who, in your opinion, move the organization forward by applying the values. So the 10 ATBs are there. You get to identify the behavior, attach it to an ATB, and acknowledge and recognize the teammate. We'll have, on a really good month, 5,000 of us will share 30,000 recognitions. Well, that takes an investment. That is, it could be easy. It's easy for someone, maybe easy for someone to say, well, let's cut that out, or that's not important, or, we spend $1.5 million on that a year. Do we really need to be doing that? And so there's a whole series of things that, that everything from your recruitment process, the whole people journey, everything that you build into your organization, you need to think about it in terms of how it kind of connects together systemically, and your long-term commitment to, sort of advancing it and always improving on it moving forward. The great thing about these elements is that they start to work together over a period of time, and that creates momentum. The secondary part of this thing is that leaders have to be great at connecting the dots. So you are able to talk about agile or customer experience or exponentiality, or you name the current trends, and connect them and bring them back in an understandable and accessible way for team members to know how that translates to the company's purpose and its values. And that keeps things together, and it doesn't then appear that the organization is always chasing a purple squirrel or the next new shiny object. And so leadership has to work hard to connect the dots and let people see the long-term flow.
For sure. And yeah, I mean, that's one of the challenges of leadership in general is, having, on top of having to meet all of the deliverables that leaders will typically have to make, because typically these people are very, high executives, and they have, their own technical deliverables that they have to answer to their managers for and that kind of thing. But in and amongst all that, there is still the added burden and the added necessity sometimes of having to think critically about how the team is operating and how the team's performance can be optimized, and what sort of internal changes may have to be made in order to allow that to happen. So, as in these leadership positions, and I'm sure you can relate to this, there's always the sort of dual task of managing your personal deliverables to the organization and to your direct managers, while still making sure that the team around you is operating at an optimal level.
And the sucker punch in this whole thing, Lucas, is that a lot of leaders start to think about culture as an and, as opposed to a foundation or a part of. And leaders have got to be able to think and work and apply their leadership in layers. They've got to be able to connect dots and be at various layers of the stratosphere around leadership at the very same time. And if your head can't think that way, then I think if you want to be just linear or incremental, then don't bother being a leader. And so don't think about, I've got to now think about the culture or the values of the company. That thinking has to soak in to the business model and obviously you've got to get results. No results, no job. However, thinking about culture and advancing the culture as an and, as opposed to a foundational core, is often a distraction and gets leaders doing the wrong thing.
Yeah, and I especially like that quote. That's the sort of point you just made about how culture is not an end, but it's a foundation. It's not a deliverable, but it's something that is supposed to provide the basis to the way in which an organization operates. And I think that's actually a really good point to close on. So
and I just want to make one final comment there, because I think if you have a mission or a story and you've got the ATBs, you literally have got to talk about it almost, or refer to it almost every day. If you're not, I have an Enron cube. You're probably too young to remember Enron. But I have the values of the Enron cube, the vision and values of the Enron cube: integrity, excellence, and somebody paid a lot of money to buy these stupid glass cubes to sit around. It's all just bullshit. And so if you're not living, talking about it every day as a part of everything, then forget about it. You're not going to advance your culture. In fact, you're not going to have clarity around it. So with that, I really enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, and we enjoyed having you on today, Lorne. So for those who are listening, if you want to follow Lorne and check out more of what ATB Financial is up to, you can check them out at atb.com, and you can also check them out on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. And obviously, you can check us out, our Great Place to Work events and all of our content at greatplacetowork.ca. And Lorne, you're actually going to be joining us on April the 25th for our conference, so we're looking forward to having you there. And
hey, Lucas, can I do a plug for my personal website, which is lornerubis.com? I blog a couple times a week and also podcast, so there's a shameless plug at the end. I'm looking forward to being part of the Great Place to Work conference.
Absolutely, yeah. No, we're open to allowing people this platform to talk a little bit about themselves as well. So we appreciate you joining us for the podcast, and we're looking forward to having you at the conference.
Have a great day today, Lucas. See you soon.